Torah Life Ministries come out of the world. Messiah people seek the truth.
Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. Thank you for watching. This morning, we're going to be reading a book called Philemon. And Philemon is a book about a slave named Onesimus, who was a slave and escaped slavery from the city. And he went to a big city to blend in and get away from the slavery, but he never felt free. And then he came up to a group of people in the city he went to, Collosae, a crowded city. And as he got to the new city, he saw a man in chains giving a lecture or speaking, and he listened to him. And this man in chains seemed like he was free, but he was in chains. And after the whole story of Onesimus being free from slavery, he still felt like he was in chains, almost like the Israelites when they came out of Egypt. They were now free, but they still felt like they were in slavery. So they came out of Egypt, but even Egypt never came out of them, because they still desired the flesh pots of Egypt and all the stuff they were under. And they came up, even opposed Yahweh, saying, "Why did you bring us out here to Moses when we had it made good there as a slave?" And slavery at that time is different than we know slavery today. Being the slaves were taken care of a whole bunch different than we know today. The difference is, the reason why I call slavery is they still were a slave and they weren't allowed to freely walk. But it was more like a job, that we're slaves to a job today. But today we do have the opportunity to walk. So that was kind of the difference. But so we get to the story. We have this man called Philemon, who had this slave who was Onesimus. And the book is just one chapter. And Onesimus, so he escapes. He hears Paul, and after hearing Paul speaking, he becomes converted. He becomes a believer, and he tells Paul, "I got to confess, I escaped from being a slave of this man called Philemon." And Paul says, "Well, he knows him, and he's also a convert of mine. So go back to him and bring this letter." And that's what this story is about, this letter. And it was more of a personal letter. And I don't believe that when Paul was writing this was something Paul ever thought would have been as part of the scriptures. But through the grace of Yahweh, it did make it into the scriptures. And we're reading this personal letter of Paul standing up for this whole idea of what's happening here. So it says in verse 1, "This letter is from Paul, a prisoner for preaching the good news about Yeshua, Messiah, and from our brother Timothy." So this is a letter that Paul addressed to one of his converts who had a slave. He says, "I am writing to Philemon, our beloved co-worker, and to our sister Apphia, and to our fellow soldier Archippus, and to the church that meets in your house. May Yahweh our Father and Yeshua our Messiah give you grace and peace." So here's Paul writing this personal letter for this information, and he says, first he gives thanksgiving and prayer. He says, I always thank my Elohim when I pray for you, Philemon, because I keep hearing about your faith in Yeshua Messiah and your love for all of our Creator's people. And I am praying that you will put into action the generosity that comes from your faith, as you understand and experience all the good things we have in Yeshua. Your love has given me much joy and comfort, my brother, for your kindness has often refreshed the hearts of Yahweh's people. Now understand, this is a very significant thing, because for a slave to escape, there'd be severe punishment for him to get caught. And this slave, on his own admission, came back at the advice of Paul to fess up that he escaped. That's like a prisoner escaping from a jail and coming back. But he didn't come back alone. He came back with a whole new attitude. He came back. He escaped. He wasn't a believer. And he came back. Now he was a converted believer. And so he came back, and he had this letter from Paul, who was who converted the very man who had this man a prisoner. So picture picture somebody in jail who's not a believer escaping, meeting, let's say, a warden, a retired warden or something from a previous jail. And that warden says, "Oh, I know that warden to that jail. I'm going to send a letter with you to go back." And this prisoner comes back, and the warden is just furious that somebody escaped. And he comes back, and he's really upset. But he says, "Wait a second, I got a letter for you." And he gives him the letter, and then he's reading this letter, and he says, "That is why I am boldly asking you a favor of you. I could demand in the name of Yeshua because it is the right thing for you to do. But because of our love, I prefer simply to ask you. Consider this as a request from me, Paul, an old man and now a prisoner for the sake of Yeshua Messiah." And we read here about Onesimus, who is a man, who escaped, and he says, as he tracked down and listened, he returned to his previous master, a now willing slave. Here comes Paul's letter, and it says, "I appeal to you." Now, this is not so. We already see Paul really humbling himself when he didn't have to. "I appeal to you to show kindness to my child, Onesimus. I became his father in the faith while here in prison." So somehow Onesimus ended up with Paul in Collosae. He says, "I have been much use to you in the past, but now he is very useful to both of us." Where he says Onesimus has been much useful to you in the past, but now he is useful to both of us. "I am sending him back to you, and with him comes my own heart. I wanted to keep him here with me while I am in these chains for preaching the gospel, and he would have helped me on your behalf, but I didn't want to do anything without your consent. I wanted you to help because you were willing, not because you were forced. It seems you lost Onesimus for a little while so that you could have him back forever. He is no longer like a slave to you. He is more than a slave, for he is beloved brother, especially to me. Now he will mean much more to you, both as a man and as a brother in Yeshua." Or his brother in Messiah. So now we see here Paul's appeal to this man, and remember the context of what's going on. This personal letter that Paul was writing, pleading for this man and his situation. It says, "So if you consider me your partner, welcome him as you would welcome me." And then it says, "If he has wronged you in any way or owes you anything, charge it to me. Paul, I, Paul, write this with my own hand and will repay it, and I won't mention that you owe me your very soul. Yes, my brother, please do this favor for me. For Yahweh's sake, give me this encouragement in Yeshua." So here, Paul, again, we already discussed the situation Paul was in and where he was at, and here he is, pleading to this man. He says, "I am confident as I write this letter that you will do what I ask, even more. One more thing, please prepare a guest room for me, for I am hoping that Yahweh will answer your prayers and let me return to you soon." And Paul's final greeting, and he says, "Epaphroditus, my fellow prisoner in Yeshua Messiah, sends you his greetings. So do Mark, Archippus, Demas, and Luke, my co-workers. May the grace of Yahweh Yeshua Messiah be with your spirit." Hallelujah. So that was Paul pleading his letter, a letter that they never thought was going to make the scriptures, but it did. And that's it's a significant letter as you read this and you think about what was taking place, because technically before we were believers we were all prisoners, and now we became free under Yeshua Messiah, and we go back and pleading that we're accepted and treated different. Now we're treated as family. So we go back, we make restitution to where we once were, a different person. Now we're coming back as a new person. And just like Yeshua set us free in a jail and, and setting us free from death row, we've been set free. and we're not running. We're going back as a different person. Hallelujah. All right, everybody, we're reading the scriptures every day. Shabbat Shalom. Tonight, we're going to be doing a live fellowship every Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern to midnight. So check that out tonight on the YouTube channel, Torah Life Ministries. Until then, everybody, have a blessed day and a blessed night. And thanks for watching this. Please share this well on YouTube and Facebook. And shalom, shalom.
Out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways. Torah Life Ministries, come out of the world.